Welcome back to the World History Channel, where the past breathes and legends rise again. Today, we step into the blazing dawn of one of the greatest figures in human history, Alexander the Great. His journey didn't begin on a battlefield, but in the heart of Macedonia, where a boy in royal armor stood beneath a dramatic sunset, his eyes already reflecting the vastness of the world he would one day conquer. From a young age, Alexander was no ordinary prince. He was shaped not only by the sword, but by the mind. Under the tutelage of the legendary philosopher Aristotle, he was immersed in a world of logic, ethics, politics, and poetry. Inside marble courtyards filled with ancient scrolls, Aristotle didn't just teach him knowledge, he planted the idea that greatness was not inherited, but earned. At just 18, Alexander would have his first taste of war. The Battle of Chaeronea was a defining moment. As the Macedonian phalanx advanced like a machine, Alexander rode ahead, fearless and electric. His charge through the enemy lines wasn't just a military maneuver, it was a statement. He wasn't just Philip's son. He was already becoming a force of his own, but fate moves fast for those born to rule. After the sudden and mysterious assassination of King Philip II, the crown passed to Alexander. At only 20, he was draped in the royal cloak of Macedonia, crowned under a sky thick with uncertainty. Surrounded by noblemen who once served his father, Alexander stood tall not as a boy, but as a king with the fire of conquest already burning in his veins. His ambitions stretched far beyond his homeland. Soon, animated battle maps would light up with sweeping arrows, each one marking a city taken, a kingdom absorbed, an empire unfolding. His first major test came at the Battle of Issus. With chaos all around, Alexander led a thunderous cavalry, charged straight at the heart of Darius III's Persian army. The gamble was bold and brilliant. The Persians broke. Alexander had announced himself to the world. Look closely at his portraits from this era. Those lion-like features, golden hair, and piercing eyes weren't just royal embellishments. They were reflections of how the world began to see him. A warrior king with the spirit of a demigod, but Alexander was not just a leader, he was a master of military innovation. Under his command, the Macedonian phalanx transformed into an unstoppable force. With Sarissa stretching forward like a deadly wave, his troops moved with terrifying precision, an extension of his own strategic mind. Even before empires bowed to him, there were signs. One of the earliest legends tells of Alexander taming the wild horse Bucephalus, a creature no man could ride. But the boy prince saw what others couldn't, facing the horse toward the sun so it wouldn't see its shadow. In that moment, a bond was forged. Man and beast destined for history. Finally, the siege of Tyre tested not just his might, but his will. Against a seemingly untouchable island fortress, Alexander defied logic. He built causeways, launched towers, and turned the sea into a battlefield. After months of siege, Tyre fell. The world watched in awe. The boy king was now something else entirely, a storm made flesh. As Alexander pushed deeper into Asia, his legacy grew with every step, each victory adding another thread to the fabric of a global empire. When he entered Persepolis, the jewel of the Persian world, it wasn't just a military conquest, it was a symbolic triumph over 1,000 years of Persian dominance. Crowds lined the majestic streets, banners flew in surrender and awe, and Alexander, still in his 20s, rode through the gates of the great king like a living god. The city had never seen a conqueror like him, but glory carries shadows. That same night, Persepolis burned. Some say it was a calculated political statement. Others claim it was an impulsive act fueled by alcohol and vengeance for Persian invasions of Greece. Whatever the cause, the flames rose high into the night sky, licking the heavens. As the city turned to ash, Alexander stood motionless, the fire casting flickering shadows across his face. It was the moment he realized he was not just shaping history, he was consuming it. Seeking answers beyond the material world, Alexander journeyed across the Egyptian desert to the sacred oracle of Siwa. Under the blazing sun and amidst an eerie silence, he entered the temple. The priests emerged with a message that would echo for eternity. Alexander was not just a king, he was the son of Zeus Amon. Whether it was political theater or a moment of divine awakening, Alexander embraced it fully. His destiny, he now believed, was godlike, but even gods need companions. Beneath the stars, away from the battles and crowns, there was Hephaestion, his closest friend, advisor, and perhaps the only man who truly understood him. In a quiet tent, with torchlight dancing on their faces, the bond between them was more than military alliance. It was loyalty carved in stone, emotion hidden behind the facade of conquest. The road to ultimate power led to the Battle of Gaugamela, an apocalyptic clash where two worlds collided. On one side, the Persian king Darius III with his vast army and war chariots. On the other, Alexander, whose strategic genius turned chaos into victory. He struck the heart of the Persian line like lightning, forcing Darius to flee yet again. This was not just a battle, it was the moment the Persian Empire ceased to exist. Now undisputed ruler of the largest empire ever seen, Alexander donned Persian robes and sat on the golden throne. The boy who once tamed a wild horse now ruled a realm that stretched from the Aegean to the edge of India. Surrounded by generals and maps, he plotted further conquests. For him, the world was not enough. Crossing the deadly Hindu Kush mountains, Alexander tested the limits of human endurance. His army trudged through snow, freezing winds tearing at their faces, but still they followed. At the river Hydaspes, they met King Paris and his war elephants in the monsoon rain. It was one of Alexander's toughest battles, but victory came. Soaked in mud and blood, and yet, in a moment of surprising grace, Alexander showed mercy. Standing beside the captured King Paris under the monsoon clouds, he asked how he wished to be treated. The answer, like a king. Alexander nodded. True greatness, he knew, was not just in conquest but in honor. By the time Alexander reached the height of his power, the world itself seemed to bow before him. From the mountains of Greece to the banks of the Indus, an empire unlike any before it sprawled across continents. An ultra-detailed map of his realm reveals its sheer scale: vast cities, deserts, rivers, and cultures all united under a single name, Alexander. It wasn't just land he conquered, it was hearts, minds, and histories, but conquest alone was never the end. In a grand Persian ceremony rich with symbolism, Alexander married Roxana, a Bactrian princess. The wedding was more than a royal union, it was a powerful message of cultural fusion. Draped in silks and surrounded by music that blended East and West, it was a moment that embodied his vision, not of ruling over people, but of bringing them together. This vision took form when Alexander stood before his diverse army: Greeks, Persians, Indians, and more, urging them to see beyond race and rank. In that moment, he was not just a king, but a dreamer, preaching unity to men forged by war. It was radical, even revolutionary. His army didn't just follow a leader, they followed an idea, but no mortal, not even one who believed himself divine, can escape fate. In Babylon, the center of his new empire, Alexander fell ill. His generals, the very men who had crossed deserts and stormed cities with him, stood helpless as fever gripped their leader. Physicians whispered, priests prayed, but nothing could stop what was coming. The greatest warrior the world had ever known, struck down not by a sword, but by something unseen. Then silence. His throne sat empty, his crown untouched. The air was thick with disbelief. The man who had never lost a battle, who had walked among gods and reshaped the world, was gone. And yet, his legend was just beginning. His funeral became a myth of its own. In a golden chariot adorned with relics from across his empire, Alexander's body was paraded like that of a divine being. Soldiers marched in solemn formation. The flames of memory burned bright. He may have died young, but his impact was eternal. Alexander was more than a conqueror. He was also a thinker, a philosopher in bronze and steel. One half of him wore the warrior's helmet, the other cradled a scroll and globe. He wasn't just obsessed with borders, he was obsessed with ideas. That obsession may have sparked the vision behind the Library of Alexandria. While the library itself was built after his death, the seeds were planted in his lifetime. A center of learning where scrolls from every corner of the known world would be collected, a place where knowledge, not war, would define greatness. Centuries later, in deserts and ruins, archaeologists uncover statues, coins, and symbols that still glow with his legacy. The face carved in stone is unmistakable. Alexander lives on not in blood, but in memory. And in the end, we are left with a montage: a boy taming a wild horse, a warrior charging into battle, a king uniting nations, and a figure fading into legend under a star-filled sky. What made Alexander so great? Perhaps it wasn't just what he conquered, but what he imagined.